Assalamu alaikum. We saw how the introduction of Surah al-Fajr, the Qur'an's 89th chapter, after a long multiple oath, enumerated examples of transgressors of extreme prosperity and power that were annihilated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the past, as a warning against Allah's devastating earthly punishment for those who defy Him, and as a reminder that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever watchful and is ever on the lookout for those who dare do so. The ensuing part of this surah evolves from this latter divine threat to declare a fact that, as did happen to those annihilated before, the case has always been such with humankind, that man typically acts with impiety and reckless self-indulgence every time he is tested with well-being by Allah's omniscient wisdom, and that man falsely assumes that he is inherently worthy of being favoured and honoured and is deservedly entitled to a life of welfare, wealth and fulfilment. But the surah here conversely clarifies that wealth and power are no indicators of divine favour, just as adversity is no indicator of divine disfavour. The surah affirms instead that both well-being and hardship are only tests for man's dutifulness and gratitude to Allah, and for man's sincere practice of goodness. And it affirms, moreover, that people, meaning those typically lacking true faith in Allah and in the last day, fail in those fundamental tests because of their cruelty and material acquisitiveness. And thus it is that no matter what, when man is put to the test by his Lord, who provides them on this basis with bounty and a lofty status and with enjoyment of a blissful life, he habitually claims, "My Creator and Nurturer has honoured me." And no matter what, when he is put to the test by Him, who on this basis constricts for him his rizq, his sustenance and provision, he habitually claims, "My Creator and Nurturer has humiliated me." But no, indeed, rather you do not offer tender, loving care to orphans, and you do not urge upon one another the feeding of the poor, and you devour inheritance voraciously, and you love wealth without restraint. This part of the surah opens strikingly with فَأَمَّا, which is composed of the adverb fa and amma. Fa, which means and thus, or in this manner. Understandably, this adverb adds a sense of continuity by introducing a conclusion, explanation or observation that is related to what has preceded it. And attached to this adverb is the conditional adverb, what we call harfu shart, amma, which, according to sources of Arabic rhetoric, bears the meaning of mahma yakum min shay, that is, regardless of everything or no matter what. I translate the combination of the two introductory adverbs as and thus it is that no matter what, etc. Next, the verb akrama yukrimu can be seen repeated 3 times in these ayahs. Listen. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن أكرمن. And later كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم تكرمونه. Now, noticeably, in each of these three positions, the verb is rendered with a special shade of meaning, as suits the context. Let me explain. From the point of view of Allah's bestowal, it means two things: to treat with karam, which is generosity, and to provide with karama, which is prominent position amongst people. I put the two side by side as provide with bounty and a lofty status. Now, in the short-sighted view of the arrogant man, it means to honor, attributing divinely granted honor to himself. Third, with regard to people's treatment of orphans, it means to give tender, loving care to those orphans. After having described man's delusions concerning his sustenance and provision, and his delusions about his own deservingness of prosperity, there instantly pops up the word kalla, which, as we have seen before, functions as harfu rad'in, an exclamation expressing negation and or forbiddance, in firm objection to what is mentioned right before it, while it simultaneously bears the sense of haqqan, meaning truly, functioning thereby as an adverb of emphasis for what is stated right after it, which is usually the result of or the reply to the case being condemned earlier. I translate this kalla, marked in the middle by the orange marker of parallel denotations, as but no, indeed. Another comment to make at this near literal level of my rendering is related to the word Rabb. You see, unlike other places where it appears, this word, in the two sentences uttered by man within the present text, is translated not as my Lord, as it is rendered in all Qur'an translations, but in my translation as my creator and nurturer. The reason for this is that the speaker of both these sentences is, as we are going to see, an unbeliever, and as such he is somebody who does not actually admit that or acts like he owes Allah submission and obedience as a Lord. So from his point of view, as a speaker, he is no slave of Allah's, nor is Allah within this framework his Lord. Therefore, the way to understand his saying Rabbi, that is my Rabb, is to consider the different implications of the word Rabb in Arabic, and then choose what fits within the specificity of the present context. And that is how we come to understand him as actually saying, my creator and nurturer, thereby referring to Allah without due reverence as being him who has brought me into existence and provides me with sustenance. Finally, within these same two sentences, I add the adverb habitually, that man in both cases habitually claims so and so. The justification for this insertion is that the verb claims in both sentences comes in the verb's present shape. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا, and then فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. This shape of the verb indicates constant or habitual repetition, as is the case with the simple present tense in English. Otherwise, it is acceptable and quite normal in Arabic to say, for example, إِذَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ قَالَ, instead of فَيَقُولُ in the present. But qala would not bear this shade of meaning of constant or habitual repetition. Straight after the mention of powerful unbelievers who were previously devastated, followed by the ensuing stern warning which states that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever watchful and is ever on the lookout for those who defy Him, the subsequent ayahs reveal that transgression lies in the very nature of the human ego when not refined by divine guidance. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ, and thus it is that no matter what, when man as a whole race. Now this is the first of three things that we need to understand about man in this ayah and the next one. That man here and in similar ayahs in the Qur'an is meant to be an archetype that stands for the human race in general. This is because the definite article al that is attached to the singular noun insan, meaning man, while the context is free from any reference to any specific person, indicates the noun's all-inclusiveness of the whole race, what we call al-istighraq. The same stylistic rule applies to the word yatim and the word miskeen in ayahs 17 and 18 that we shall shortly speak about. This takes us to the second point that we need to be aware of concerning man here, ensuing from the first point, that where the context does not specifically indicate masculinity, the word man in Arabic has a generic, gender-neutral sense, standing for the human race. So man in the present case must be understood to stand equally for both males and females alike. And the third comment to make about man here is that it stands for unbelievers in particular, whom I describe between parentheses in maroon italics that I use for connotations and implied denotations as those typically devoid of true conviction in an eternal afterlife. The evidence for this latter point comes from Surah al-Ma'un, chapter 107. That surah, you see, which we have meditated before, delineates man who yukadhibu bid-deen, that is, who disbelieves in the judgment and the requital after death and in the religion of Allah as a whole. The surah condemns that doomed unbeliever for two characteristics of his. Those are, listen carefully, فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ, that he shoves orphans away in cruelty and disdain. And second, that he وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, that is, does not urge upon others the feeding of the poor. And these two are the very same characteristics that the present surah attributes to man: not treating orphans with tender loving care and not urging upon one another the feeding of the poor. So, back to the beginning of this part of Surah al-Fajr. When man, meaning this archetypal human being, typically devoid of true conviction in an eternal afterlife, إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ, when man is put to the test by his Rabb, his Lord, Creator, Nurturer and Owner, and that we understand is a test of well-being, is put to the test of well-being, as the text ahead explains. How? فَأَكْرَمَهُ. Fa means on this basis, that is, within this context of divine testing, akramahu, who that's all wisely provides him on this basis with a bounty of worldly advantages and a lofty social status, akramahu, wa na'amahu, and provides him moreover with na'im, with the enjoyment of a blissful life. What does man do then? فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. He habitually claims in a boastful air, my Rabb, that is my creator and nurturer, akraman, has granted me special ikram, that is, he favors me and has therefore honored me. So much for the first shape of testing. The next ayah talks about the opposite shape, starting in the very same way. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَبْتَلَاهُ. And no matter what, when he is conversely put to the test of hardship this time, by him, to which I add, who is his Lord, Creator, Nurturer and Owner, فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, who on this other basis all wisely qadara, constricts for him his divinely bestowed rizq, which I further clarify the meaning of by adding connotative enrichment in maroon italics, his rizq meaning his sustenance and provision, which encompass everything advantages of whatever sort, material or otherwise, that is ever enjoyed, whether realized or not. What does man in that case contend? فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمًا. He habitually claims, فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. He habitually claims in a resentful air, oh, my creator and nurturer has humiliated me. And here at once, the word kalla bursts in, but no indeed, refuting and debunking man's false claims in both well-being and adversity, and marking a strong shift in the text's narrative point of view from a third-person depiction of what man believes and claims to a direct address to humankind. This shift materializes with the consequent word bel, which means rather. Naturally, this word contradicts and refutes what precedes it and introduces what it posits as the actual case. In the present text, it retorts to the false claims made by man by addressing people for whom man stands with a condemnation of their heartless, insatiable ego, which indicates their lack of faith in the hereafter, as we've explained. Rather, O humankind, you do not tukrimun al-yatim. That is, you do not take the trouble to offer tender, loving care to al-yatim, orphans, namely to little orphans. Because a rule in Islamic law, it's a rule in Islamic law that there is no orphanhood after reaching puberty. لا يتم بعد احتلام. So every yatim is a child. Next, and you, moreover, do not تحاضون, urge upon one another the feeding of the miskeen, of the plainly poor. And you devour inheritance voraciously, and you love worldly wealth in a manner that is jamma. Jamma. Jam is an adjective that means excessive. Without going into the details of the derivation, I render the adverbial phrase hubban jamma, descriptive of unbelievers' excessive love for worldly wealth, as without restraint, In this manner it is that no matter what, when man, as a whole race, typically devoid of true conviction in an eternal afterlife of fair reward and punishment, and hence finding honour and esteem measured by worldly possessions and stature rather than by the noble standards that man has been created to fulfill, which should entitle him to a blissful afterlife, when man is put to the test of well-being by his Lord, Creator, Nurturer and Owner, who all wisely provides him on this basis with a bounty of worldly advantages and a lofty social status, and moreover with the enjoyment of a blissful life, in order to see his gratitude to his Creator and Nurturer and to test his kindness to others, he, with his egoistic, arrogant and impertinent nature, ignores the purpose of his existence in this temporary life that is meant for testing, and habitually claims in a boastful air, "It is only for my outstanding merit, no doubt, that my Creator and Nurturer favours me from amongst all others, and has therefore exclusively honoured me with what I deserve." Believing this, he would only transgress even further against his Lord and against others, with even more conceit and injustice. And no matter what, when he is conversely put to the test of hardship by him who is his Lord, Creator, Nurturer and Owner, who on this other basis, all wisely constricts for him his divinely bestowed rizq, his sustenance and provision, which encompass everything advantages of whatever sort, material or otherwise, that is ever enjoyed, whether realized or not, in order to see his patience, his contentment with his Lord's will, and his trust in his Lord's benevolence, such an unbelieving person becomes overcome by dejection and disrespectful of Allah's wisdom and ungrateful for his countless favours that he still all the time enjoys. He, without true faith and without awareness of the purpose of the earthly life, then feels offended, and he hence habitually claims in a resentful air, "Oh, my Creator and Nurturer has indeed unfairly humiliated me by thus denying me what I deserve." And deluded by such misbelief, he might transgress even further against his Lord by indulging even more in all sorts of misdeeds in order to get what he desires. But no, indeed, the matter of divine bestowal is not at all as claimed by such an ignorant doubter of divine wisdom and justice. For worldly wealth is certainly no divine honouring or reward for anyone, nor is worldly disadvantage any kind of divine disgracing or punishment for anyone. For Allah, in His omniscient wisdom, tests both believers and unbelievers alike with both well-being and adversity. But the truth is that when Allah honours whoever He benevolently wills, He does so by bringing those close to His grace, for they're seeking Him through willing submission to Him as the one and only Lord and Deity, and through the performance of righteous deeds sincerely in His cause. And when He conversely disgraces whoever He justly wills, He does so by distancing those from His grace due to their choosing to defy Him with impiety and unrighteousness. And thus the truth about your case, O people who misinterpret the bestowal of your Creator and Nurturer, is that you do not care to seek His pleasure through willing submission to Him and through the performance of righteous deeds in His cause, which would bring you to the true honour of divine favour. Rather, O unbelieving humankind, you do not take the trouble to offer tender, loving care to little orphans, but you break their hearts instead by mistreating them and neglecting their needs. And you, moreover, do not take the trouble to practice and to urge upon one another the feeding of the plainly poor and the spending on acts of goodness in Allah's cause. And you devour the inheritance deserved by others voraciously, especially of those who are weaker and less privileged. And you love worldly wealth without restraint, so much so that you keep on hoarding and reserving it non-stop, whether lawfully earned or otherwise, never willing to spend of it on noble causes.